Picture this. He was an experienced ranger with 20 years of service, a man who knew every trail and shadow in the forest. David Stone, the one they called the Shadow of the Woods, a ranger who had never been lost. On October 15th, he set out on a routine patrol scheduled to return by 6 p.m. What could possibly go wrong? But then came the strange part. His vehicle was found with the engine still running. Tire tracks led from the Jeep into the forest. Yet that forest was practically impassable. Between the ancient trees, even a person could barely slip through. So how did a vehicle manage to drive there? Then, the real twist. His jacket was discovered hanging on a branch 12 feet above the ground. The branch was far too thin to support a person's weight. Even stranger, his radio was found locked inside a barn 8 miles away from the disappearance site. The padlock was intact, and the key was with the owner. Did that help investigators, or make the mystery even deeper? And one more chilling detail. Records showed that over the past 40 years, 6 other rangers had vanished in that same area, all in October, each disappearance exactly 6 to 7 years apart. David was the 7th. Coincidence or a pattern? Can you solve a puzzle where every piece breaks the laws of physics? David Stone, 40, knew the Olympic National Park of Washington State like the back of his hand. In 20 years of service, he had completed more than 4,000 patrols, rescued 123 people, and earned from his colleagues the nickname the Shadow of the Woods, a nod to his uncanny ability to appear exactly where he was needed, often before being called by radio. Local Makah tribe members regarded him as an honorary part of their community and called him the Keeper of the Trail. On October 15, 2023, David set out for a routine patrol toward the mountain cabins in the park's northwestern sector. His route included checking 3 tourist shelters along the Sun Creek Trail, a task he had done hundreds of times before. According to the plan, he was to return to base by 6 p.m. His service Jeep, a Ford Ranger, was discovered 12 hours after his last radio transmission. The vehicle stood in the middle of a remote dirt road, wrapped in thick, impenetrable fog. The engine was idling, headlights still on, and the heater set to maximum. On the front seat lay a neatly folded orange rescue blanket from his standard kit. But David Stone himself was nowhere to be found. The fog in that area had lingered for 2 full weeks, unusually long for that season and terrain. Meteorologists couldn't explain why the dense veil refused to disperse, despite the mountain winds that normally cleared the valley within hours. Visibility was no more than 30 to 40 feet, making the search nearly impossible. His portable radio continued to emit a weak signal for 72 hours after his disappearance, though no one ever answered. Data from the Jeep's GPS tracker revealed something baffling. An hour before the discovery, the vehicle had moved in perfect circular paths, each exactly 1 mile in diameter, as if someone had drawn them with a compass. What the search teams found in the first hours defied all logic. Tire tracks spread out from the Jeep in multiple directions, into old-growth forest where even a man would struggle to pass between the massive pines, let alone a vehicle. Yet the tread marks were sharp and undeniable. David was born and raised in a small logging town called Forks, about 20 miles from the park's border. His father, James Stone, worked at a sawmill and hunted on weekends to feed the family. From the age of 5, young David followed him into the woods, learning to read tracks, predict weather by animal behavior, and navigate using subtle signs in nature. At 18, he enrolled in Washington State University, studying ecology and forestry. After graduation, he had no hesitation. He joined the National Park Service. His colleagues often spoke of his extraordinary sense of direction. David could pinpoint his exact location by the sound of flowing water, the direction of the wind, or the angle of sunlight breaking through the treetops. During nighttime search missions, he found lost hikers in places other rangers had already searched and passed by without noticing a thing. Over 20 years of service, David rescued 123 people. a number he kept recorded in his personal journal, each rescue carefully noted. Among those he saved were children separated from their families, elderly tourists struck by heart attacks, and climbers who had fallen from rock faces. But David's personal life wasn't as steady as his professional one. 2 years before his disappearance, he divorced his wife, Sarah, who could no longer endure his obsession with work. After the divorce, he often spent nights at the Park Service cabin, skipped vacations, and volunteered for extra shifts on weekends. The park's staff psychologist, Dr. Margaret Wilson, noted early signs of emotional burnout and advised him to take an extended leave. David only smiled and said, "Doctor, the forest is my home. Why would I need a vacation from home?" In the week before his disappearance, he started acting out of character. He asked a coworker for a spare battery for his radio, something he had never done in 20 years of service. He gave his mineral collection to a neighbor's little boy, the one he'd been building since his mountaineering days, and donated 27 books about Pacific Northwest nature to the local library. "Something tells me I should be prepared," he said to Senior Ranger Bill Harrison. When Bill asked, "Prepared for what?" David just gave a faint smile and replied, "For what's meant to happen." The morning of October 15th was unusually clear for that season. David arrived at the ranger station at 7 a.m., half an hour earlier than usual. He refueled his service jeep, checked his radio and GPS unit, and loaded the standard patrol kit in the back. At 8:20, he left the ranger base, reporting to dispatcher Janet Thompson that he was beginning his route. He inspected the first cabin at 9:30 and made his check-in call. "Base, first cabin's clear. Stove working, firewood stocked, water system functional. Moving on." His voice was calm, steady, free of any tension. He reached the second cabin around 11 and gave another routine update. "Base, second cabin checked. Replaced a burned-out porch bulb. Everything else is fine. Heading to the third." But somewhere between the second and third cabins, the story took a darker turn. Around noon, when David should have been halfway to his last waypoint, fog began forming unexpectedly over the mountains. The park's weather station recorded a sudden temperature drop of 8 degrees within 20 minutes, a rare anomaly for that terrain and time of year. At 12:30, David made his final transmission. "Base, I'm at the third cabin, checking the roof condition after the last rains. Fog's getting thicker, but I could find my way home with my eyes closed. Starting the return trip now." Those were the last words anyone ever heard from Ranger David Stone. At 11:30 that night, dispatcher Janet tried to reach him for his final daily report. Only static answered. 15 minutes later, another attempt. Same result. At 3 p.m., when contact had been lost for nearly 90 minutes, Janet heard something through the static that made her blood run cold. An SOS signal tapped in Morse code, 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. The signal repeated 3 times, each 30 seconds apart. Then the frequency went dead silent. Senior Ranger Bill Harrison immediately organized a search team of 6. By 4 p.m., rescuers reached the area near the third cabin, but the fog had grown so dense that visibility dropped to barely 10 or 15 feet. David Stone's service jeep was finally found at 1:30 in the morning, in a completely unexpected location on a forest road 4 miles from the third cabin, but in the opposite direction from Ranger headquarters. Volunteer searcher Michael Peterson spotted the faint glow of headlights cutting through the mist. What the rescue team discovered was deeply unsettling. The Jeep was parked perfectly in the middle of the dirt road, as if the driver had stopped, turned off the ignition, and stepped out casually. All of David's belongings were still inside: his wallet, ID, cash, a half-eaten sandwich, and a thermos of coffee that was still warm. Then came the inexplicable part. Tire tracks spread out from the vehicle in multiple directions, not the tracks that had brought it there, but fresh ones, leading straight into the dense forest. Forensic specialist Robert Case, who arrived at dawn, confirmed the tracks belonged to that very Jeep. Physically, though, it was impossible for the vehicle to have traveled that way. The forest there was made up of towering century-old firs and spruce, growing so closely together that even a person could barely squeeze between the trunks. The tire marks continued for 200 yards into the woods and ended abruptly at a fallen tree. By sunrise on October 16th, the search had escalated into a full-scale emergency operation. The search involved 32 rangers from 4 national parks in the region, 12 members of the County Emergency Response Unit, 18 civilian volunteers from local search and rescue teams, and 6 dog handlers with trained tracking dogs. The greatest obstacle remained the fog. After 3 full days, it not only failed to lift, it thickened even more. Meteorologists could provide no explanation. Dogs picked up David's scent near his service vehicle and led the search party into the forest, following the same direction as the mysterious tire tracks. Rex, a German shepherd with a spotless record in locating missing persons, tracked confidently for about 150 yards. Then, something inexplicable happened. Rex stopped abruptly, raised his head, and began to whimper, softly, in that pained tone dogs use when sensing an earthquake or imminent danger. He refused to continue. Despite the urgent commands of handler Steve Martin, the other dogs reacted in exactly the same way. At that precise spot, all scent was lost, and their agitation grew. A team of trackers led by expert Jim Walker examined the location carefully. The ground was moist but not swampy, ideal conditions for scent retention. Yet none of the 6 dogs, of varying breeds and specialties, could move beyond that point. "It's as if the man simply vanished," Walker wrote in his report. "In 30 years of tracking, I've never seen anything like it." Search efforts continued for 84 hours straight. Every known cave within a 10-mile radius was examined. Abandoned mines and quarries were checked, streams combed, every ravine explored. On the 4th day, when hope of finding David alive had nearly faded, events took an even stranger turn. Gerald Fisher, an amateur hiker who ignored the authorities' warnings and ventured alone to the edge of the search zone, discovered the ranger's official jacket. It was hanging from a branch of a 100-year-old fir tree, 12 feet off the ground. The branch was no thicker than a pencil and clearly incapable of supporting an adult's weight, even if he had somehow climbed up there. The jacket was dry, despite a full night of drizzle. In the breast pocket sat an unopened packet of Army rations crackers, also perfectly dry, though its paper wrapper should have soaked through within hours in the wet air. The next discovery changed the course of the investigation entirely. 2 days after the jacket was found, local farmer Edward Clark, who lived 8 miles from the disappearance site, walked into the sheriff's office carrying David's portable radio. He said he had found it that morning in his locked barn, resting on a shelf with his tools, 6 feet above the floor. The barn was secured by a padlock, its key always kept on Edward's person. No signs of forced entry or tampering with doors or windows were found. The radio was switched on and tuned to the park's service frequency. The battery showed a full charge, even though 6 days had passed since David's disappearance. In the park's archives, a young clerk named Susan Wright uncovered documents that cast doubt on the uniqueness of David Stone's case. Over the past 40 years, 6 other rangers had vanished under similar circumstances in that same northwestern sector. Ranger Thomas Miller went missing in 1984 during a routine patrol. Jeffrey Hunt disappeared in 1991, leaving only his service radio hanging from a tree. Marcus Davis was lost to the fog in 1997. All cases had the same hallmarks: dense fog appearing suddenly in clear weather, equipment found with the engines still running, personal belongings placed in impossible locations, and no sign of struggle or animal attack. The most chilling detail was the timing. Every disappearance occurred in October, spaced exactly 6 to 7 years apart. David Stone had become the 7th name in this grim statistic. Detective Laura Campbell of the county's Major Crimes Unit took the Stone case under her personal supervision. The theory of an accident was dismissed almost at once. David knew that wilderness, like his own pulse, 20 years of field experience, impeccable discipline. He never once broke protocol. The idea of a wild animal attack was just as implausible. The region housed black bears and cougars, yes, but in autumn they prepared for hibernation, steering clear of human paths. It was only when investigators examined the ranger's psychological profile that the real mystery began to unfold. Dr. Margaret Wilson, the park's chief psychologist, recalled several disturbing statements David had made in the months before his disappearance. He spoke of the forest calling him home, of hearing the trees whisper, of feeling bound to that land more deeply than to humankind itself. In his field notebook, they found cryptic phrases scrawled in careful handwriting. October, the time of crossing. Fog, the doorway between worlds. They wait for the one who is ready. Searching for context, detectives sought guidance from the Makah people whose ancestors had inhabited these forests for millennia before the park ever existed. Tribal elder Joseph Blackwing, 85 years old, agreed to speak, only off record. He told them that the area where David vanished was known in legend as the Place of Mists, a sacred site where the veil between realms grows thin. According to ancient stories, the forest sometimes chooses a guardian, a human spirit worthy of keeping watch between worlds. "Your ranger was a good man," the old chief said softly to Detective Campbell. "He understood the forest better than many of my people. Such men are sometimes invited." When asked what he meant by invited, Joseph's eyes drifted toward the hills cloaked in fading light. "When a man lives with the forest long enough," he said, "the forest begins to live within him, and when that moment comes, he must decide to remain human or to become something greater." A young Makah guide named Tommy Starwolf reported eerie signs near the Place of Mists in the weeks before David vanished. First, small creatures fled. Rabbits, mice, squirrels, then the deer, then the bears. Even the birds refused to fly overhead. "The forest was preparing," Tommy murmured. "When the spirits choose a new guardian, nature always knows first." Officially, Ranger David Stone is still listed as missing. Unofficially, most have stopped searching. 2 weeks after his disappearance, the operation was suspended. The northwestern sector of the park, the Place of Mists, is now closed to solo patrols. Rangers only enter in pairs, always with a guide from Central Command. 1 month after David vanished, the fog dispersed as suddenly as it had appeared. Meteorologists remain baffled. No climatic model explains it. At the park's headquarters, David's colleagues mounted a simple memorial plaque beneath his photograph. It reads, "To Ranger David Stone, keeper of the forest, who became part of what he protected." Every year on the date he vanished, they gather in silence and leave wildflowers from his favorite trails. David's mother, 73-year-old Dorothy Stone, still drives out to the mountains. Every weekend she switches on a weathered handheld radio tuned to her son's old frequency and speaks softly into the static. "David, if you can hear me, know that your mother loves you and is proud of you." The Rangers cannot bring themselves to tell her that no one uses that frequency anymore. Visitors to the northwestern sector often report an unsettling presence near the third cabin, a whisper of footsteps behind them that fade when they turn, a sense of eyes in the fog, watching. Photographers complain that their cameras malfunction there, as though the air itself rejects the act of being captured. The Makah elders are not surprised. They say David Stone never vanished. He merely crossed over, becoming the spirit guardian of the forest he once patrolled. To this day, they leave offerings at the third cabin: cedar branches, wildflowers, traces of tobacco carried in cupped hands. The story of the ranger who walked into the mist remains unfinished. Perhaps it is meant to be. In a world where satellites can read license plates from orbit, there are still places that erase a man completely, leaving not even a footprint. David Stone disappeared in the digital age, yet as completely as wanderers lost to medieval darkness. And maybe that's the point, because even now the forest keeps its secrets. The edge between civilization and wilderness is far thinner than we dare to believe. The forest remembers every soul that walked its trails, and somewhere, deep in the shifting fog, perhaps Ranger David Stone still walks his patrol, guarding the home he never truly left. Some mysteries are never meant to be solved. Thank you for watching.